How's it going, Great Day Nation? Chris Thomas here. Hope you're having a great day kind of day. And my guest on this installment of Great Day Nation is Riley Jarvis. He's founder of the Sleep Consultant, which performs individualized lab testing to help people optimize their performance and well being through sleep. To learn more, go to thesleepconsultant.com. Riley, how are you doing?
I'm doing great today, thank you. And how are you?
I'm feeling a little bit sleepy. I'm operating on not much sleep myself. I only had, uh, gosh, 3 hours sleep, but
3 hours.
yeah, it
Mhm.
was not really a full 3 hours. It was 3 hours where I woke up. But I mean, before we get into diagnosing my sleep patterns, let's talk about you.
Let's do it.
What led you to being interested in sleeping patterns and potentially helping others with their sleep?
Absolutely, yeah. So with anyone kind of in the the wellness niche, it all starts from their own personal journey that they went through, and the same happened with me. So many years ago, I went to school for finance, and when I graduated, I was working, with private equity investment banks, and like the hours were just insane. Looking at spreadsheets, trying to close deals with clients. I mean, it's just a very intense environment. You can think of the movie like Wolf of Wall Street to the extreme, and what happens behind closed doors is pretty intense sometimes, and like every single percent counts within your performance, and that's like your physical performance, your mental performance, your memory, your recall, talking with people, the multitasking, and you have to really be firing on all pistons. And it was good, for the first few months, but all of a sudden, like I was in my young 20s at the time, I really started to crash my energy levels, my thinking, my fatigue, and everything sort of started to fall apart. And so went to the doctor. Um, General doctor didn't have too much to say about it. Months later, eventually went to specialists, and they said I had Crohn's disease. It was during this process that my performance was so bad at my job that I ended up having to quit because of that. I mean, I probably would have been fired if I stayed there longer, but I ended up having to quit. And I didn't know what was wrong with me because I had remembered like maybe 1 or 2 years prior to that, I was feeling fine. I could keep up, but then it just felt like the world was, you know, going through my fingertips at just this rapid rate, and I didn't know what was happening to me. So one of the specialists, a gastroenterologist, said I had Crohn's disease, which is autoimmune sort of issue, especially within the bowels, but it can affect the entire body. And what that was causing me was just this fatigue, the brain fog, and everything else that went with it. It was great because that gave me answers to, really getting to the root of what was going on. But the solution to that they were giving me with, forms of medicine and pills, the side effects were just really making me feel even worse. I was bedridden. I lost a bunch of weight, brain fog, went into piles of debt because I wasn't able to work. Additional course I wanted to take, couldn't do those anymore. So I was in this position where I had my back against the wall, and it just felt like that, like it was a lonely time. It was a hard time. Felt like I hit rock bottom. It was like, well, what am I going to do now? So at that point, I really had to roll up my sleeves, take my health into my own hands, and start, clawing my way back up to the surface. And the way I did that was researching hours upon hours a day online to see what's behind all this machinery that's running our body. And I started going to the help eats like our hormones, our brain function, all these other things. I probably did that for a period of about 3 or 4 years. Along with that, spending tens of thousands of dollars with private medical doctors around the world, functional medicine, different ones on the holistic part of things. And then all of a sudden, my everything started to improve. In particular, it was my sleep. Once my sleep started to improve, and I was tracking my sleep through a sleep tracker, my stomach started to improve. My brain fog went away. The weight was coming back. I was getting the physique that I wanted, gaining lean muscle mass, and everything started to come back online. And the more I got a taste of what this new feeling felt like, the more I wanted to do it, to the point where now, over the fast forward to present day, the last 5 years, my Crohn's has been in 100% complete remission. And it's sort of funny because when you go to doctors, they don't know why. They say, "Oh, it must be coincidence." So now that's pretty much what I've done over the last 5 years, is now helping people with their sleep. And it's not to a disease state like where I was. It's to show people what is possible, but it's really on the functional state to help them with the performance, their productivity, save them hours during the day. Sometimes getting, an extra 1, 2, 3 hours during the day is so crucial, because then you can use that to spend time with your loved ones, another side hustle that you want to do, really whatever that case is. And with better sleep, we can get into it too. Just comes a myriad of so many other things.
So, do you think that the Crohn's disease was linked psychologically to the lack of sleep, in that you were sleep deprived and that was making you feel lethargic, which potentially led you to having the symptoms of Crohn's disease?
I think so. Yeah, it's a really good chicken or egg question. Which one came first? And I think that it was a lack of sleep. I probably, had a genetic susceptibility to the Crohn's. It's just that whatever that gene pathway was didn't get activated until I was sleep deprived, burning the candle from both ends, drinking tons of coffee, like alcohol to wind down in the evening. And it was just to a point where my body couldn't take it anymore and just all this stress inside going on. That's sort of what triggered things. And I think that's what started, those flare ups to happen. But it was primarily that sleep loss and deprivation because my mind was racing, couldn't get to sleep. Mind was racing, would wake up constantly throughout the night and just, probably what you feel today, only 3 hours of sleep. And it's just kind of that feeling of maybe brain fog. It could, for some people, it manifests in different ways. It could be anxiety. But for me, it was just this constant stress, my brain always on overdrive. I was living in my mind. It didn't seem like I could ever shut it down and get out.
Oh no, I'm firing on all cylinders. I'm going 110 miles an hour, Riley. Yeah, and it's interesting because there is some research that says, well, uh, back pain is often tied to stress and anxiety, that it's
Mhm.
not an actual back injury, it's these psychological stressors that we have. So there seems to be a lot of components of the body that are impacted by our psychological well-being.
Mhm. It is extremely true. How we think, and this is with the latest science, they're showing like how we think, how much it influences our thoughts, our telomeres, which is kind of an indication of how aged our body is, and all these other things, and how we think can really manifest how we feel, and that's what they call the somatic, psychosomatic symptoms a lot of the time, where we can feel like we have this back pain, but our mind plays such a critical role in how we're feeling. And that's why, you go back to the placebo effect, how powerful that is. And so that's why a huge part to better sleep is really getting your mind down. And then when you can sleep better at the same time, your mind, its default state will be better because, you won't be as cranky, you won't be as emotional, you'll be, just sharper minded and kind of the most optimized version of yourself.
Now, what are the key ingredients of sleeping in general
Mhm.
that are conducive to improving daily performance?
It's a really good question. So to put in, it can get very complex, but to put into layman's terms, we can think of our sleep in, so our sleep runs in cycles, and in particular 90-minute cycles. And within one 90-minute cycle, we'll go from, light sleep, where we're kind of in that meditative sleep where we could wake up, and then we'll go into the deeper form of sleep. And then eventually we'll go into REM sleep. And then the cycle will repeat itself. And our body and our mind rely on about 3, 4, 5 of these sleep cycles. And this is where sleep quality comes in, because sometimes people think, well, I slept 8 hours, I must have slept great, but why don't I feel productive the next day and focused the next day and ready to perform at my highest capacity the next day? But they're not getting those full optimized sleep cycles. So that's one big part of it. The first half of our sleep cycle is normally associated with our deep sleep, and that's repairing our physical body. So a lot of times our muscles, our human growth hormone, which is super important for repair. As a side note to that, a lot of people who have been struggling, seeing physiotherapists for sore neck, sore back, and they've just been living years with it, taking pain medication. One thing is, once they start to fix their sleep, they're getting the full release of their human growth hormone, which is so vital for repair, to the point where now they don't experience that back or neck pain. It just suddenly starts to go away, which is amazing. And that's the thing. It's not treating a specific one area. It's addressing everything in a non-specific way. And then that's where, stuff will start to get better. We can get into that more shortly. And then the second half of our sleep is with the REM sleep. And REM sleep is very important for our mind. And this is why when people wake up in the middle of the night, we won't get those full deep REM sleep cycles, which will make us feel more groggy the next day. And the clients that I work with, it's getting to sleep. Yeah, it's one thing, but the biggest is when you wake up at 2, 3, 4 a.m. in the middle of the night. Then you can't think. Then you're thinking about everything you have to do the next day. Then you're thinking, oh God, I can't sleep, and it's just that vicious cycle. And then you swear you won't do it again the next night, and then it happens again. So that's where it can turn into this downward spiral a lot faster before people realize it, even for months and years. So that second half of sleep is, I would say, arguably more important. And, just waking up in the middle of the night, yeah, it might not seem like a big deal. And everybody's programmed, genetically to be a deep sleeper or a light sleeper. But for some people, they can be severely impacted to where they're not hitting their most optimal state during the day.
Now, what I'm seeing a lot of discussion more and more in regards to men's health
Hmm.
is, well, feelings of lethargy
Hmm.
and just not feeling like you're able to perform at a high level
Hmm.
is linked to low testosterone levels.
Yeah.
And how do we disentangle the variable of sleep from testosterone levels? Is that even possible? Could there be a connection?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And testosterone and sleep play a kind of this two-lane role with each other. It's kind of like a dance, and the better we sleep, the better our and higher our testosterone will be, because our we get testosterone release, and our body will get the most amount of testosterone. It's known as an anabolic hormone, which that means it's kind of like it's repairing and it's building up. The opposite to that is a catabolic state. That's where it's breaking down. So when you think you go to the gym, you rip your muscles, you're not gaining muscle from the exercise itself. It's in the recovery afterwards. And we're breaking everything down. But then when we can sleep better and we're repairing, we're consequently going to get a higher testosterone level release. And just there's different forms. You have free, you have total. And why that can be low, either the free or the total, can be a number of reasons I'll touch on in a second. But what's really important to know is the deeper we sleep, the lower our cortisol levels will typically be. And if we're not sleeping that great, there's a good chance that our cortisol levels, our stress hormone, can actually be higher. Now, it's either the way the pathway works is it's either testosterone, everything associated with that, those anabolic type of hormones, or it's cortisol. It can't really be both at the same time. So if we're completely stressed out, always drinking coffee, burning the candle from both ends, like I was really early in my journey, what ends up happening is we're going to be using that cortisol pathway, and our body's going to be flooded with cortisol versus the anabolic and the testosterone. And this is where, when we can rest, more so than be stressed out all the time, we can be in a much better place. Now, this comes, by the way, from our mind. This is positive thoughts, because our thoughts can influence our hormones, and can influence our sleep and everything else like that. The other really cool thing is every year, after the age of 30 for men, their testosterone decreases by 1%. And I also read a really cool statistic that over the last, I think it's about 60 years, the average testosterone level of a man has been going down. And we call it normal because we take the average, like when you go to the doctor and you'll see what your testosterone level is, and he says you're within the normal range. Versus if you were to go to the doctor, let's say 50, 60 years ago, you'd be classified as very low testosterone. And it's just because the entire worldwide population of men's testosterone, or whatever that sample group is, has just been going lower and lower and lower. And you wonder, like, where does this actually come from? And I've been doing a lot of reading on it, and a lot of people say, it comes from a lot of the plastics, the xenoestrogens that we ingest through plastic water bottles. Could be, potential fluoride in the water, just everything that's contaminated inside of our food that we're ingesting in our environment, what we're breathing in, and everything else like that. Whatever the case is, though, it's really interesting how our testosterone levels have decreased. I think it's 20% by each generation, which is pretty scary stuff. I remember looking at a picture of my great grandparents on the farm and just seeing how young they look. They were 60 years old, and they honestly looked like they were 35. But what the normal is now, we associate that with the normal. But it's really interesting when you live a very healthy, lifestyle diet. um, s- prioritizing sleep, and all these other things, how much better you can start to be relative to what the average population is.
Now, in terms of what this sleep consultant is offering in the marketplace that is unique from other services geared around improving sleep,
Mhm.
what can you say to someone that is potentially interested?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I deal with everybody who's like 20 years old who's looking to optimize their performance because maybe they're an entrepreneur and they want to travel the world and get a bunch of money and all this stuff, to somebody who's maybe like 60, 70, 80 years old and their goal is longevity. So depending on where somebody is in their life, it's really custom tailoring a protocol that's suited for them and what their goals are. But the good news is everybody needs sleep. And the way that we sleep deeper, longer, better, and everything that goes along with it is pretty much the same except for some variables. And how I classify that as somebody who like really needs sleep versus somebody who's an optimizer. And this is someone, who's really the top performer who's looking to uh, um, optimize, and you could say biohack different elements of their biology. So the way I do that is two different programs that I have. One is a video program. It's called the Sleep Solution System. And that's an 8-week program where we're going through diet, exercise, lifestyle, movement, the mind. The subconscious mind is so important. A lot of people have a lot of forms of micro trauma in their subconscious mind that really drives a lot of their behavior, where they just get angry at something versus, if an outsider saw that, they'd be like, why is he acting that way? And we all see, things through a lens based on what our previous experiences are. And a lot of things that we hold on to, it's not until we release it do we really just let this, lead blanket that just feels like is over our head that we're holding on to, that we really feel this good sense of well-being. So that's just a side tangent. I've been working with a therapist who's been in the field about 20 years, who I partnered with, who works on the mind piece. And I didn't just want to do that myself because I knew how important the mind was. So that's why I really wanted to partner up with somebody who really specialized inside of it. And I mean, the results you can see through just the mind alone is really incredible. So that's kind of, that 8-week program. We have group coaching and everything like that. The more exclusive program is working one-on-one with me, and that's called the Executive Sleep Coaching Experience. And this is where I send lab test kits directly to people's house, and it's worldwide. And we'll be looking at roughly about 700 biomarkers. And then I'll be looking at all their genetics. We'll be seeing, like, are they a night person or a morning person? What kind of inflammation might potentially be inside of their body? Just all these different factors. And a big part of that is a lot of people say they're a late night person, a night owl, as you would call it, but they actually are a morning person. And so there's a mismatch between what their environment and how they live their life versus what they're genetically hardwired and programmed to be best optimized within. And it's only when a lot of the time when you match both together do you see just tremendous increases in people's energy levels, productivity, focus, and everything that comes with it. But if you've been doing the night routine for somebody who's a morning lark for a period of years, you do think that's your normal just because you're so used to that. So that's the genetic part of things, looking at about 400 genetic markers inside of there, distilling all that into its forms and seeing how it's applicable to sleep with inflammation, blood sugar, all that stuff. The next is we're looking at your hormones. So this is all your hormones related to cortisol is a massive one. We're looking at your cortisol rhythm, your melatonin. A lot of people can't sleep that great because their melatonin is very, very low at nighttime and their cortisol is jacked up. And what this does is it causes people's minds to race, to feel that sort of wired and tired feeling. And then in the morning, they feel exhausted because their cortisol is low. Our cortisol should actually be highest in the morning, then lowest at night. But if there's this dysrhythmia that's going on, there's different forms of it. This is what can cause people to feel fatigued at different parts of the day, whether short term or long term. It just depends on how long people have been, burning the candle on both ends for, so to speak. And melatonin, and we're looking at noradrenaline, testosterone, all the female hormones. These are all just very, very important. Different forms of cortisol, metabolized cortisol, free cortisol. Just seeing the specifics of DHEA and all the byproducts of testosterone are very important too for men, especially. We're also going to be looking at brain neurotransmitters, body metabolites, seeing how well the body can detoxify. For example, or how well their thyroid's working. But your detoxification is very important in our body because anything that we eat, it's something known as oxidative stress. And if we have a lot of oxidative stress in our body, our liver is a big, you can think about it as like the master um, re- recycler of antioxidants within our body to really help. It's kind of like the clean master that really just gets it out of there. And if our liver channels, they call it pathway 1 and 2, are really blocked, then we're really not going to be able to produce, for example, the hormones that we need, like our thyroid. There's T3 to T4 conversion that we need, which can help facilitate better sleep. Just all these other things that are going on with our hormones and neurotransmitters as well. We'll be looking at the body's toxic load, potentially heavy metals, pesticides, mold exposure is a big one. A lot of people don't realize they live in moldy homes. And if you're breathing that in for years and it's stored inside of your body, this will slow down your mitochondria, which will give you energy. And just to get a little geeky, there's something known as our Krebs cycle, and there's 14 different steps that we need to make one form of HTP, which is kind of like the energy unit, you could call it. And if somewhere along those steps, if we don't have the byproducts to go to the next step, then that's going to cause us to not make as much energy, and the result is we don't feel like we have as much energy. So it's really cool to get under the hood of your biology. And then based on what I see with all this, on top of that, we look, like I said, brain neurotransmitters, your thyroid gland. The other big one is your gut. People have a lot of parasites that they're not aware about, and it's not just going down south. It could just be eating contaminated fish or something like H. pylori that can be passed through saliva. And what this can be causing is even people who are eating a healthy diet can the nutrients don't get fully absorbed into the body because the parasites are eating this all up, or the bacteria inside of our gut, which they're seeing the science is super important, drives our behavior, drives how we feel. Just anxiety or weight loss, metabolism, all these things are super important. And our gut's also known as our second brain. And the reason is because our brain communicates. It's kind of a two-lane highway with our brain and through something known as the vagus nerve, which is the wandering nerve. And if our gut isn't as optimized as it should be, which also produces 90% of our serotonin, which is our feel good hormone, also our melatonin inside of there. So if our gut, you can just see the link here. If it's not, whether it's gut motility, being able to get toxins outside of our body, whether it's to stimulate food, nutrients. There's something else known as the leaky gut, which can cause a lot of inflammation for people along the gut lining. This can just be causing, us not to be producing as much serotonin, melatonin, so we can't sleep. Also, everything is just so related to each other. So, bring it all around. When you're able to see under the hood of somebody's biology, see what's actually going on an objective level. When we're testing, not guessing, we can really take a sniper-like approach and really start addressing things head on. And then from there, people start to get better a lot more quickly.
Oh, sniper approach. It's sounds violent. No, I'm kidding. So uh, Riley's answer was sponsored in part by Activia, um, because with the gut health, it's very important. Activia yogurt.
Yes.
What goes into the process of individualized scientific lab testing? Because if everyone has unique sleeping qualities, then are there any real clear scientific patterns regarding sleep? So essentially, if there are so many idiosyncrasies involved with each person's sleep cycle, how can we come to scientific conclusions that are generalizable?
That is a very good question. And what the approach is so you could do it two different ways. You could either, for example, in the lab testing, you could look at, for let's just say we saw one hormone that was off. Now we could do everything we could to address that one hormone that was off, but we really don't know what that root cause is. So this is where the power also comes in, where when you have an expert who can see everything from a top-down level view, it's not like if we have 50 things that we see out of balance on the lab testing, which could be contributing to poor sleep, to people's poor energy, whatever the case is, you could address each thing head on. But what's actually the easier approach is sort of the Pareto's principle. And what that is it's an overall general improvement with lifestyle choices, movement, and everything else, compared to what people's old state of how they were, what their old routine was, whether it was like if they're very sedentary and they weren't moving around much. Now we get them moving. If we're changing their diet around with less inflammation, now their gut's working better. Just everything else. We'll see all these 50 markers at the same time start to get better and back into alignment. So we don't necessarily know what that one specific thing is. So, for example, with the sleep patterns, if it's if let's just say there's at least 100 different variations of people's different sleep cycles, there's not really one specific protocol to address each case. It's what I would say, there's more beginner things you can do, and there's more intermediate and advanced things you can do, and we always start with the beginner low hanging fruit first, and people will start to see like 80% improvements in their sleep. And so at that point, it doesn't really matter what that specific maybe sleep wave pattern that they were experiencing that might be a little bit dysfunctional, or whatever it is. I really like to dial it down. Like, can you simplifying it for people too also really helps them stay on whatever that path is. And the most important thing is consistency, and that's where simplicity can help them out the most. So for somebody who can't sleep well and get to sleep, this is where we'll come in and we'll start looking at. So for example, if it's the lab work, chances are I might see something, for example, like maybe they have a parasite in their gut that's causing them to feel excessive stress. Or, if they wake up in the middle of the night, it's usually when these parasites come awake, you get a cortisol release and boom, you start to wake up in the middle of the night. So I just know that when we start to address these hidden stressors inside of the body, and there's many of them, then that type of individual will start to feel better, just based on the pattern that they're experiencing. Or it could be a supplement, for example, if they can't fall asleep because their mind's racing. It might be a supplement like GABA, L-theanine, magnesium threonate. It's very good for passing the blood-brain barrier. Supplements, of course, you for sure want to check with your doctor. But that's somebody there. If somebody wakes up in the middle of the night, is it because they are drinking too much and they wake up to go to the bathroom? Or is it because they're having nightmares and they wake up? Is it because they wake up and they don't know why they don't feel stress at all, and they just can't sleep, like they have no stress associated with it? There's many different things you can do to address that. So for example, somebody who wakes up to go to the bathroom, it's one thing that I've tried, and with clients as well, is giving them a pinch of Himalayan sea salt before they go to bed. Now, of course, you don't want to drink too much before you go to sleep, but this can really help with something known as aldosterone to really help hold on to your fluids, known as fluid retention. Somebody who wakes up for let's say, bad dreams at night, a big reason of this is when we go into the deep REM sleep cycle, our brain is trying to process and consolidate everything from the days prior, what we have to do going forward, and just make sense of our world. And if it has to deal with all these things, for a lot of people, I mean, with the subconscious mind, it makes no sense at all. I mean, if you think of the movie Inception, it's just world upside down, going to different different dimensions depending on whose minds you look into. But one thing you can do is, before you go to sleep, is write everything down that you're thinking about. And what that essentially does is it's just a brain dump. So your brain has less to process while you sleep. And it could just be, for 5 minutes. And what this causes is people to stop waking up as much in the middle of the night. And the results are really, excuse me, profound for a lot of people as well. So, it's just to answer your question in a complex way, there's so many different variations that there's not a specific protocol that you would take for this one specific variation. I would say, I probably have, if I was to break down all my protocols into each person, because everyone is custom tailored based on what they tell me. And this, it's kind of more of an art than a science sometimes, but science definitely leads the way. And how they feel is also a leading indicator. So taking the objective and subjective data and coming in with this whole analysis interpretation, I probably have about 2 or 3 dozen different, approaches you can do, whether it's a supplement stack, whether it's a protocol for someone to follow, but it's all dependent on what their age is, what their goals are, and all these things and factors that go into it.
Now, how extensive is all of this work? Because when you're talking about brain functioning, is functional magnetic resonance imaging used, trying to see what's happening in terms of brain activity, with the gut health aspect? I mean, are you looking at, and I'm not trying to be funny, are you looking at, samples of someone's number two? I mean, just how intense is this analysis of, you know, people's body chemistry and what's going on in terms of their daily functioning?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the way it works, somebody comes to see me, I do a free sleep assessment on them, seeing, what they want. For most people, usually video program's very good they can start with, but for those that want to take it to the next level, they want to do the lab test kits. What I do is I send them lab test kits directly to their house. Now these come from some of the best labs in the USA, the most advanced, and I have many to choose from, but I kind of pick it. I cherry pick based on what the results are, looking at them, and they're kind of the gold standard across, whether it's the gut, whether it's the hormones, and that kind of thing. They send those lab test kits directly to the client's houses, and it's worldwide too. And that could be stool, that could be urine, that could be saliva, it could even be blood too. And what they do is they take that, whatever that sample is, then they basically put in a test tube. Could be a dried urine strip, and then they call FedEx. FedEx comes to pick it up from their doorstep, and then it gets shipped overnight directly to the lab where it's processed. And then it could take a couple to a few weeks, just based on what the lab testing is, because they're very extensive. And then after that, I'll get a notification saying that the results are in, and then I'll see all those results electronically. And then based on what I'm seeing, this is where I'll follow up with the client. And before that, create a very good approach, of how we'll be dealing with all this. And sometimes too, depending on where they're at, they have a doctor that I might be working with them with side by side, especially if they're on medications and stuff like that. You can't mess around with people's health. So this is where you have to baby step in, and also what's reasonable and feasible for them. Because I could come in here, I could see like a bunch of parasites, their hormones are tanked, and I could throw like a dozen supplements at them, give them all these protocols to follow, but it would just overwhelm them at the end of the day. There are some people who will definitely be serious about it, and they'll be able to handle all of it because they have the time and everything else. Because you definitely need to allocate time to begin that healing process, and that's a matter of it could be weeks, it could be months, or it could be years. Usually on the longer end, if you're extremely burnt out, it's about a 12 to 18 month recovery period for a lot of people. For me, it was that, because it was just everything was really tanked. The lab tests were showing. But what's important to know is it's all relative. So you don't have to go to 100% overnight to start to feel better. If in 1 month you feel 10% better, that can be a drastic improvement in how you feel and operate in the world. And it's a great feedback system too. So yeah, that's kind of everything in a nutshell, how it works.
Have you run into instances where you are, through the testing, diagnosing intense or long lasting health condition that a person isn't even aware of? Like, for instance, someone's diabetic, and they didn't
Mm.
even know it.
Yeah, that is a good question too. And with any of these, extreme medical conditions, if I see on the lab testing that, okay, there's probably something much deeper here going on, I will say you should definitely go see your doctor for this, because that would be, this disease type of state. This is where the medical professional would definitely have to get involved in doing that. So an example of that might be, maybe they do have H. pylori and they want to get that addressed. Maybe with their gut test, I'll see they'll have fecal cord blood, which basically means indications of irritable bowel disease with ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease. Then I might say you may want to go check out, go to your gastroenterologist to maybe get a colonoscopy to see what's going on. Just things like that. Maybe it's their adrenal gland and everything's tanked, and potential Addison's disease. And I can't tell them that, but I can say this is something you may want to, go check and get looked at. They go see their doctor, get all those, tests run. That, it could be an endoscope, it could be, just things that are above and beyond just them taking a sample at in a sample kit at their house. And then once they get the results from that, then if that's something they're okay with, then I work with them to really address that that thing head on, essentially.
What are warning signs tied to behavior or performance in day to day life that people should, on their own, be on the lookout for in their own sleeping habits or the sleeping habits of family members to help them?
Very good question. So I would say the biggest one I get a lot is a person doesn't realize that they're snoring, r- like rolling around throughout the night, talking at nighttime. They thought they slept amazing until they have a new partner who witnessed how they were sleeping, or it could be a sleep tracker too, whatever the case is. They just have some objective measurement tool to tell them what's actually going on. So that's a really big wake up call that really helps people as a guiding measurement stick to give it, a deeper indication of what might be going on. In terms of how they feel throughout the day, it could be anything as easy. Now, it's tricky sometimes because sometimes I speak to people and their problem awareness, like let's say a scale of 1 to 10, 10 is they're very self-aware that what this problem is causing them. It's typically the case versus like 0 would be somebody's not problem aware. And a lot of the time people fall on that low end of the scale and they don't think that there's anything wrong with their energy or there's anything else, until we start doing stuff with them, they get a taste of what it feels like. They're like, wow, I feel so much better. I wish I did this earlier. Versus, other people, they know something deeper is going on because they remember from a few years ago, a few months ago, when they just had an abundance of energy and they just don't have that anymore. So they have something to compare it to. And for these people, it could just be, just a lack of motivation generally. It could be less focus. Maybe it's the fluency in your words, how you can speak. Maybe it's your, just ability to be a good leader, to be a good, spouse, to be a good father or mother. Just how you carry yourself throughout the world. You usually get an inner feeling of what's going on based on the world around you. Like if you noticed, it just seems like people have more energy than me in general, and they don't get crashes like I do, then that might be something you want to look at. And you always want to look at, someone who's closest to you in age and lifestyle and all that kind of thing. But there's genetic components in that. But that's one part of it. And you shouldn't compare yourself to other people. But as you get better at this, you really compare yourself and your success and your results with yourself. And that's a really good way way to assess yourself that you're going in the right direction, or maybe you haven't done that. So another thing you can do too that's just really easy to do is each day when you wake up, just writing things down. You could do a chart like energy, you do focus, you could do sleep. Usually 5 is a good one to do, and you can just do a scale of 1 to 10. And every single day, you can just write down on that scale, how do you feel today? And that'll give you a good indicator, of what's going on to you. And that's one thing I do with my clients because when I get them to track their sleep based on how they feel, and then we look at the objective data, and then we get the more they stay on that regime or that protocol, the closer we'll see those numbers start to go together. It's really amazing to see when people think what their problem is or how they rate themselves versus when you start to look at the lab work. And it's usually, it's a 180, it's a 180 flip. And I play this fun thing with my clients sometimes where when I first get the lab test kits, for example, it could be their cortisol rhythms throughout the day. And I'll say, if I see, without telling them first, I'll say, do you notice, in the afternoon, you'll usually get like an afternoon crash, or in the morning, you don't have any energy at all. And they're like, wow, yeah, you read my mind. How'd you know? And then you show them lab test kits, and then sure enough, it's that. So sometimes you don't really have to say much. The lab test kits really show all because when you see objective data, it's a really good sign of, you got to know what you have to do to point you in the right direction to feel better. And then you just have a coach to help you each step of the way.
What can you say to someone who thinks sleep is weakness? And you see this a lot with
Yeah.
CEOs, leaders that are very um, hands-on, focused on the task at hand,
Mhm.
and the mindset is the more time sleeping, the less time to get stuff done. So, what can be said to someone that has that mindset?
Yeah, that's sort of the current crisis of today's society. It's kind of that hustle culture, like hustle more to get ahead. And it's across all the industries. I mean, where I came from, I mean, that one's obvious in the finance industry because I mean, they think, why would I sleep 1 or 2 hours more when I could sleep less and get more done, just drink coffee and then get on with it. And then maybe drink alcohol or take a sleeping pill and then be able to sleep. And then, just keep burning the candle. But what people don't realize sometimes is if you're sacrificing something from one area, it's going to be sacrificed from somewhere else. And it's usually somewhere else in your biology. And, like maybe a few weeks, a few months isn't a big deal. But when you start doing that for a period of many months and many years, this is when you start to notice it. And especially for the people who are older, who are concerned with longevity, this is where you can start to get into, sort of disease states happening, like increasing cancer risk. Alzheimer's is a super big one. Just all these things that are happening. So I think education is a big one. And I do realize people want to sleep less in order to get ahead. But what I tell them to consider is this is what if you could sleep? What about if we could improve the quality of your sleep? So maybe you don't necessarily have to sleep extra hours, even though that would be the most ideal, but just in their circumstances, let's optimize the hours of sleep you can sleep so that they're deeper, more rejuvenative, give them just a deeper sense of restoration the very next day. And because within that area alone there's so much that can be done, that's something that they're more willing to work with now. When they have more productivity, they can get more done in the day. Now they have extra time to themselves, more free time, so they can get to bed earlier, or maybe they have more time in the morning now to really optimize that extra 1 to 2 extra hours that they need so they can get that full 7, 8, 9 hours of sleep.
On a related note, what can you say to someone who might be working extensive hours, perhaps multiple jobs,
Hmm.
with parental or caregiving responsibilities? And they
Hmm.
say, I really do want to have a full night's rest. I
Hmm.
just don't have the time to maintain a regular sleeping regimen.
Yeah, and that is one of the toughest cases to deal with because it's like, well, I just don't have the time. Like there's only 24 hours available in the day and I just have no time to myself and for sleep. And the time when I do have to sleep, it's just, so much going on. My mind's racing, so the quality of the sleep isn't that great. So what I tell them is this is we want to be able to provide as much support that we can for you, with the time that you do have, and the time that you do have to yourself, or the ability to sleep, or any free time at all, even if you can make 5 or 10 minutes, we it, what that requires is just optimizing the hours of the day more. So instead of what I call it is instead of passive recovery, we want to make that active recovery. So this comes in a few forms. So instead of, for example, somebody who comes home, maybe they only have an hour, after they get home, feed the kids, eat dinner, like their nighttime routine, and they start to wind down. Instead of watching Netflix, sitting down watching TV, maybe instead try doing like meditation or doing an Epsom salt bath. Or for some people, it's a cold shower for the active recovery. For some people, there's just all these different modalities. It could be a walk outside or a jog outside, all these different modalities. Because what they show is like on a biological level, when you do the active recovery, your body becomes so much more restored. You really reduce a lot more cortisol through these methods. And for those people who say they have no hours available throughout the day, that does exist. But usually, if they try at all, if they can find 5 or 10 minutes to do a guided meditation, that's really good. So that's one part of it. The other part is to try taking things, to give your body the support it needs to get through that stress. And one of them, and again, this is a supplement, so absolutely check with your doctor. But one is called, they're known as adaptogens, and these are sort of a supplement category to help you adapt to the stress. So what that means is if your stress is too high, it'll help it bring it back down. Like if the cortisol is too high, the adrenaline is too high, it'll help it bring it back down. And if it's too low, it'll help it bring it back up. So it's kind of going within the state of homeostasis. And what they are is a group of natural herbs that have grown in the ancient, like in India, all throughout Asia, Russia, and many other things. And a kind of cool story on some of them is they would grow in the mountains, and hundreds of years ago, when there would be battles, a lot of the soldiers would attribute their wins to those herbs that they would consume because it would give them more energy, more just less stress, the ability to go longer, and all that kind of thing. So here's a couple of them. One is known as rhodiola, and that helps. It's a little bit more stimulatory. That one's usually pretty good to take in the morning or early afternoon. And the the company or the source that you want to get it from is just as important. And you want to make sure it's, a pharmaceutical brand. And yes, some are much more expensive, but you actually get what you pay for. One that I really like, and I'm not affiliated with them in any way, but they're called Gaia Herbs, Gaia, and they're amazing. I really just back up their quality. Another really good one is ashwagandha. This one is from India, and in Sanskrit actually it means to give you the power of the horse. And it's very good for more towards the evening to start calm yourself down, maybe late afternoon. And there's different ones too. I mean, you have holy basil, you have shajandra. There's dozens upon dozens of them, but these are really good ones to go to whenever you're feeling stressed overall. And other supplements too. It just depends. It could be magnesium that really helps relax the body, and magnesium is also in Epsom salts, and there's magnesium glycinate, magnesium threonate, which is really good for the mind. There's 5-HTP for serotonin, and just these other ones that people can try to really help them adapt to that stress, whatever they're experiencing.
With all the advances in technology taking place, which digital devices or tools have you come across that can be helpful for people looking to improve the quality of their sleep?
Great question. And it's an amazing time to be alive because there's so much cool technology and gadgets that are coming out. I see new Kickstarters every day on it. I've spent tens of thousands of dollars on all these different gadgets and things like this. And I would sort of narrow it down to these ones. The first would be there's an app on your phone and it's called Brain.fm. And what it is it's kind of like binaural beats. It's kind of a step up, but it helps put your brain into a state. What it does is send frequencies sort of into your brain. You can think of to put it into a state where the frequency is pro. It could be like pro focus, pro sleep, pro relaxation, meditation, creativity, and all these other things. But it's amazing because you can just have it on your phone. You do need over the head here headphones for it. But for me, for example, I mean, if I don't feel like I'm so much in the zone, I'll put it on within like 5 minutes. I'm right, and you can do a session for 2 hours if you want, or have it on all day. It really just depends. But I know there's a lot of science to back it up. So that's one. Another really good one that is good is especially with blue light. Blue light suppresses our melatonin levels, which is our master sleep hormone. And especially before bed, we want to make sure that we're dimming our screens before bedtime. Usually about 2 hours is a good sweet spot. And there's a software. It's called Iris. Iris Technology. I think the website is Iris IRIS Tech TECH.co. And the people that are, I mean, I've researched these guys quite a bit, and they really know what they're talking about. But I think it's only about $3 a month. But what it does is it reduces screen flickering, which is stimulatory, and especially with eye strain, reduces the red light, just all these other things that go into it with our screen that we don't think about. And once we have that, it just runs in the background, and then it's based on what your local time zone is. So when it starts to get dark, then it will start to dim the lights too. So that's another really good one. Um, One other one I typically would suggest is blue light blocking glasses. A really good company for this is what are they called? True Dark, TRUE, and then DARK. These are probably the best in the industry, and the ones in particular, I would say these are the best glasses in the world for blue light blocking and just sleep overall. They're called the Twilight Classics, and you're gonna look like an X-Men character when you wear these because they're essentially red, and they block out any peripheral light that's coming through. And that's if you want to take it seriously. But there's a lot of different styles they have. But for those who want to take it to the extreme, that's one they can definitely try. Between those three, I mean, there's many others that people can try, but without making it too complex, those are really good, simple, low hanging fruit.
So if anyone wants to be a cosplay Cyclops, they can look for those glasses
That's right.
at Brookstone. Now, what potential role, if any, does dreaming play in positive sleep quality? Because you mentioned nightmares having a negative impact, but can dreaming have a positive role in the person's sleep quality?
It definitely can, and there's this kind of a new. it's sort of a new fascinating science of lucid dreaming, where lucid dreaming, what it is where it feels like you're in control of your dreams, and it's usually for the better, and that could be whether you're flying through the sky, it could be just whatever it is. And for most people, when they wake up from a lucid dream, it's usually because they were in such a deep wave sleep state that allowed them to do that. And how you control this, hard to say. This is still sort of in the science, but yes, I do believe dreams can impact sleep quality if they are good dreams. And it doesn't mean that if you can dream well, therefore you'll get better sleep. Usually, when you have very deep sleep wave cycles, and how you get this is sort of everything that we talked about before. That's usually what'll induce a good dream. And if you don't have a lot of baggage in your mind going on, then it'll probably be for the better. And they haven't brought it down to like a pinpoint science. How do you have good dreams? But there's certain supplements that you can take to help at least induce lucid dreaming. One good one is known as alpha brain, and I think there's one particular ingredient inside there. It's either huperzine A, or it's something with our increasing. There's a neurotransmitter in our brain called acetylcholine. It's very good for memory and stuff like that. GPC choline is one, and they show how this can help induce lucid dreaming. And there's other ways too. For example, if you start focusing on it prior to going to sleep, there's kind of a system that you can follow to doing that. You can just find that from a simple Google or YouTube search. It's kind of a way to probably increase your chances, but 100% getting there, hard to say. So I wouldn't say necessarily we can try using our dreams to feel better throughout the day. But one thing our dreams are very good at is because throughout our dreams, we usually get a really good idea. And it's, some amazing inventions that have been brought up throughout the last many hundred years have been through people with dreams. So I know, for example, Nicole Edison, a lot of his inventions, maybe there's a couple of them, but I remember reading there was no alarm clocks obviously at that point in time, but he kind of created this custom one where he would make himself fall asleep like a nap and start dreaming. And as soon as he would wake up, he would have a notepad and pen that he would write whatever that is. And that's really where the subconscious mind can come in and help us. And this is just another side lesson, which is really important to know, is if you set the intention for your mind to work on whatever it is in the background, the subconscious mind. A great book on this is called Psychocybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. And with this, how you can relate this in practical terms is, do you ever have that feeling where you're just in the shower and you just get the spontaneous idea that comes up and you quickly write it down? And especially for a lot of entrepreneurs, it seems to be in the shower where they get a lot of their ideas, because it's just their mind working in the background on this stuff. We don't have to consciously be thinking about something in order to make it come up. And this is another misconception with a, society today, is just like think on it, think harder, think harder. Sometimes though, if we just let go of stop holding on to the brakes and just let go and not pushing on the gas so much, we'll just let our mind work in the background of it, and then all of a sudden we'll just get that idea pop up. So dreams sort of work in that same way. If we can just sort of let it happen and just do all the right things that we talked about, then we'll get those good dreams that will lead to a good thing. And what we're really doing is just helping our brain process everything, that whether the day prior, what we have ahead, and the healthier that our brain can be overall, the more that it will work in our favor.
I don't even want to know where someone is keeping a pen while they're taking a shower. I mean, there's only so many options.
Yeah.
Goodness gracious. Now, for those people who feel uncomfortable participating in a sleep study, saying, "Well, I don't want Riley watching me while I'm going to sleep," or I don't want to, use this test kit. What suggestion might you offer, or guidance to help assuage their concerns about, participating in this type of analysis?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I don't do the sleep study myself with people. So that's usually where they go to like an actual sleep clinic, usually locally, because I work with clients around the world. It's called a polysomnograph, and that could be they're sleeping in the daytime and they're monitoring patterns, and based on what their wave um, sleep wavelengths are, that's usually where they will diagnose something, like for example, narcolepsy or forms of insomnia, just different medical conditions like this. So I don't touch on that too much. But it's very interesting to know. Like if somebody comes to me with that, that's definitely a good nugget of information as we're working with them with all these different things. But if somebody, with their health, they feel uncomfortable, they really don't want to take with the lab test kits and all these other things. They don't have to. And like I said, it's all relative. There's those extremists out there who want to do, everything at once, the biohackers, the athletes, and they'll do the lab test kits and they'll do everything that they possibly can and buy all the cool and latest gadgets with all that. And that's great. It makes them feel better, more optimized at whatever their art is, whatever the craft is that they want to perform best in. But for the average person, if it's just making modifications to their existing schedule, they'll start to feel better in a great way, especially if their baseline is they feel pretty good most of the time, but they don't necessarily, like I said in the beginning, have to be in a disease state like where I was. Most people, they instead of feeling like a 1 or 2 out of 10, they might feel like a 5 or 6 or 7. So for them to get to a 7, 8, 9, usually, it's just simple things like blocking out the blue lights before bed. It could just be a meditation. It could just be cutting out the caffeine. Caffeine is really big with your sleep. It could just be maybe not eating too late at night or exercising too late at night. Could be cutting out the alcohol because alcohol a lot of people drink in the evening time to help wind down, but it can actually interfere with our REM sleep cycles. So it's just all these, basic things that people can use and implement. And that's always why I like to do as a first go-to. If it's not because it's something that they can be comfortable with before going to that next step with the lab testing. We don't go from 0 to 100 right away. For some people, yes, we do, and sometimes it's right, and that's where the first initial assessment call can really help me determine this. But for most people, it's starting with the basics and then working your way out from there. Because at the end of the day, the most important factor is it if it works with somebody's lifestyle and are they willing to do it. And a lot of people don't have a lot of discipline, or they're just burnt out already that they don't have the motivation to just start implementing all these things. But some people do. And, for the average person that's just juggling all these things, that have after work responsibilities, they just have no free time on their hands. If we can just start implementing, 5 to 10 minutes a day, and now let's say they feel 5 to 10% better from that, that's amazing. And I would consider that a massive win in their lives. And they usually see that as well. And then when we have that win, then we go to the next one and then the next one. Just, so when you baby step this, that's where you see massive gains just because of that consistency.
Now, has anyone ever said they've had a lucid dream where they have willed you into watching them as you sleep?
That's a good question. I'm trying to think back to some. I've had a lot of clients that have said they've had lucid dreams. You never know. Maybe they have told me, they said it feels like with their sleep habits and everything else like that. Not that I was watching them in their dreams, but watching them like, are they doing the right thing to help them fall asleep? Like they're saying, did I do my, evening routine right, or my morning routine right? Like if Riley was watching me, would he be would he be giving me a green star or something like that? But yeah, that's an interesting one. We'll have to see what unfolds with all that.
Kind of like a Santa Claus thing.
Yeah.
You're watching them at all times.
Yeah.
You know when they're sleeping. You know when they're awake. You know when they've been bad or good.
Yeah.
So be good for
Gotta be
goodness sake.
careful.
Now, one of your hobbies is reading about business. What, in terms of everything you've looked over, have you been able to apply to your work at the sleep consultant, and perhaps a piece of reading that you would recommend to aspiring entrepreneurs trying to start out in business?
Absolutely. So one that's not related to sleep, but just general overall entrepreneurship, business, that kind of thing?
Exactly. Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I've read many books throughout my journey, many coaches along the way, and I wouldn't have been able to do it, without them learning all this. I mean, I definitely learned from my own mistakes, but you can shorten those mistakes from learning from other people. And I mean, they dedicate their lives of the lessons learned in the form of a book that you can essentially read within, a few hours, I mean, it's a no-brainer to me. So, the biggest one I would say that had the most impact on me, it really depends on what you're going for. If it's really the mindset stuff, one of my favorites is Robert Greene, any of the stuff that he produces. So, for example, Mastery is an amazing book, like mastering your craft, is just incredible. There's also, if you wanna get, sort of into